Tonight, thousands of tourists and locals are rolling the dice or hitting the slots. Others are going to a dispensary or one of the new lounges. Can these industries, gaming and cannabis, one day coexist side by side? Local leaders explored possibilities as state and federal laws continue to change.
I do think you'll start to see more and more conversations.
UNLV's Cannabis Policy Institute and the UNLV International Gaming Institute held a panel with industry insiders and local leaders. Gaming is Nevada's juggernaut industry. Cannabis is an $850 million a year moneymaker for Nevada now. County Chair Tick Seegerblum weighed in and says some resort leaders are looking ahead.
And I've talked to many owners and they can see the synergy, especially with food and entertainment.
Until federal cannabis and banking laws change, Nevada cannot see a dispensary or a lounge in a casino. But there's active discussion about changes at the state level to give tourists and locals more options.
Attitudes have wildly changed in the last 10 years. There are more opportunities out there that don't involve going straight for a consumption lounge in a casino.
Rihanna Durrett heads up the UNLV Cannabis Policy Institute, launched in 2023. It's also exploring possibilities in state law and regulations.
The prohibition on legal delivery to the Strip corridor. There could be legal delivery to non-gaming establishments on the Strip corridor, and that wouldn't put the gaming establishments in violation of federal law. State regulations prohibiting cannabis delivery anywhere beyond private residences. I do think that's going to be looked at and expanded this legislative session.
Durrett says at least one state lawmaker is looking into changes for cannabis delivery laws. It would start to chip at a decade of state and local restrictions. 2017, Clark County prohibited legal delivery to the Strip. 2019, the legislature imposed a 1,500-foot separation between gaming and cannabis establishments. But 2024 ushered in a new era. Legal cannabis lounges. Durrett says policymakers, if they choose, could explore lessening regulations there.
Whether you could have gaming in a consumption lounge off the Strip.
The Cannabis Policy Institute plans to conduct a survey among casinos and gaming leaders, what they think about the possibilities of cannabis when federal restrictions are lifted or modified, which, in its opinion, is still years away. We'll be right back.